So Utica and refugees. I don't know of another city in the US whose fortunes are more linked to refugee resettlement than Utica. So I can't really tell the story of one without telling a little bit of the story of the other. And so just broadly, I want to talk about diversity in the US. And the minority population across the US is going up, and it's going up rapidly. And so Utica is a small city, about 60,000 people, that is a pretty good, I think, indication of what's to come for a lot of other places around the country. And this is just a historical look at what has gone on in Utica for the last 100 or so years. And it's interesting to me because refugee resettlement is really an immigration story. And if you look at the population trends in Utica back in its heyday, when it was a little over 100,000 people, the green bars there indicate immigrants. There was a large influx of immigrants, and really they were almost 30% of the overall population, and they built that city. Immigrants from Europe, essentially, Germans, Poles, Italians. And then as you see, Utica hit those years where there's decline, industry left. The city was really emptying out, was in danger of dipping below 50,000 people, which would have had enormous impacts on federal funding and all sorts of things in the city. You start to see immigration numbers rise again. And those numbers, and if you look at the last two bars there, we've sort of evened out, and there's even a trend back up. And that is tied to refugee resettlement, without question. You can't have an economy without people, certainly, and you can't have a growing economy without growing your population. And so Utica was really in danger of, I think, dying. There were bumper stickers in the city in the 80s and 90s that said, will the last person out of Utica please turn out the lights? So nobody was really believing in Utica except for the refugees that had been resettling there for the last 35 years. A deeper look into the demographics. 27% of the folks in Utica speak a language other than English at home. 18.9% are foreign-born. I think both those numbers are low. I think when census workers come and knock on the door, a lot of immigrants and refugees find another place to be. So they get underreported. But when you're talking, and as I've listened to people talk today, and you talk about transit systems and these big citywide systems, and you're looking to get a message out to the people in your community, you need to be aware if the folks in your community don't read or speak English, because they're not going to get your message. I always, because I'm a little bit of a dweeb, look at a history of place. I wasn't born in Utica, so I got there, and I'm like, people ask me, what makes resettlement work there? Why is Utica so special? So I started to look at the history of the place. It's sort of a hotbed where the Revolutionary War happened, the Underground Railroad and abolitionist movements there. Women's suffrage in Seneca Falls is not far from Utica. And then even the Iroquois have a tradition of welcome for strangers. So welcoming folks is really part of the tradition, and I would say almost archetypal sort of knowledge in the place that I'm at. The Mohawk Valley Resource Center for Refugees was incorporated in 1981. The picture you see there is an old picture. We moved into a new building as of October 1st. So let me tell you a little bit about myself at this point. I've been doing refugee resettlement work for 11 years. I've been the executive director of the Refugee Center for about 5.5. I came to this industry with no experience in this industry whatsoever. I just needed a job, found the Refugee Center, walked in, immediately fell in love with the place, and talked my way into being hired as the employment manager. And from that day on, it has just been the place that I most like to be on any given day. The Refugee Center in Utica used to be in an old Catholic school, 3 stories high. Wonderful space, gave us lots of room to spread out. Classrooms, offices, all sorts of great things happening there, but the building was old. We would have to close on really hot days because the temperature would go over 90 degrees, and there's OSHA standards. So we're happy we've moved into a new building. And if you want to know what moving into a new building looks for a not-for-profit, it looks like the ED, me buying a pickup truck. Personally, a pickup truck, I've never owned anything like that, and buying one standard with crank windows because it was cheaper, even though I don't drive standard, and then stalling all around the city of Utica for the past 5 weeks, literally crying when I get to stoplights that are on an incline. The only staff person brave enough to drive with me at this point is my IT guy, Abdul Shakur, who was white-knuckling it in the passenger seat as we're jerking around the city. And we finally got to our destination one day, and he was just like, wow. And I turned and I said, yeah, I'm a badass, and tears are rolling down my face. And yeah. So our tagline is many cultures, one community. I want to talk a little bit about what makes my resettlement center unique. And I have the list of services that we provide at MVRCR. Reception and placement is what happens at every refugee center across the country. And there are over, I think, 350 resettlement sites right now. So it's happening all across the country. And everybody does reception and placement. And that's the core services that refugees get as mandated by the federal government when they arrive. So in Utica, that means we drive to Syracuse, an hour away, pick them up at the airport, drive them back to Utica, and they start their life there. We've set up an apartment for them. We have case management there. And for the next 30 to 90 days, we're going to do refugee resettlement. All the services you see in red below that are things that Utica does in a unique way. And the first thing that's unique about it is I have all those services in one building. And there's only one refugee center in Utica. So people know where to go if there's a problem. Not just the refugees, but also community members. So refugee resettlement cannot happen well. It cannot be done well in communities that aren't welcoming, that don't have the will to do it. And part of the way that we've built the will in Utica is our one-stop shop. Everybody knows who and where we are, the receiving community and the refugees, and now the immigrants. So if you just look at that list, we do employment services, over 400 job placements a year. We have relationships with 60 to 80 employers, and that's growing. We do immigration and citizenship work. That's fee for service, so we're earning dollars there. We have a traffic safety program that is a model for the rest of New York State. And that came out of a relationship with the Utica Police Department, who came to us and said, you know, we are stopping lots of folks in your city without proper passenger restraint. And so we really started to look into it. 5 years later, we have a traffic safety program with passenger safety technicians, which you have to go to school for a week for in New York State, to help folks install car seats properly to make sure that children aren't injured in car accidents. And compliance with seat belts and everything else in the city of Utica with regard to immigrant and refugee folks went from about 20% to well into the 90s. The police department says they rarely see any refugees or immigrants without proper restraints now. So when people know better, they do better. We have ESL classes that go on site. We partner with the school district to do that. Those are all day. We have the Office for New Americans, which allows us to serve immigrants as well as refugees. We have enhanced case management. So refugees are funded to be served for about 30 to 90 days, and that's it. If you don't find additional funding, you don't have the services to help them beyond that point. In our city, anyone can walk into the refugee center, sign up to see a caseworker, and we'll see them. It doesn't matter if you've been there 2 days or 20 years. We're going to help you. And sometimes it's just a matter of someone's got an odd piece of mail or mail they don't understand, and so we can do triage with volunteers and such. We have an interpretation department, which does about 1,000 appointments a month. and tone translation, which is global. We have a website, and that's another way that we earn additional dollars to help our other programs. So refugees are folks, obviously, that have had to flee their own country and gone to another. And it's important to know that less than 1% of all the refugees worldwide ever travel anywhere. So, and there are more refugees in the world right now than there ever have been before. We are really looking at a huge humanitarian crisis. Human migration is at unprecedented levels, and climate change and other things are going to continue to make that grow. So when people ask, why don't refugees learn English before they go to wherever they go, or learn Swedish before they go to Sweden, it's because most refugees don't travel, less than 1%. It's, you have greater odds of hitting the lottery. I want to talk a little bit just about Utica, and I want to get to some of the things that have worked really well there. That's a picture of our mayor doing his walkabouts. He's kind of famous for these. That's actually a picture of me on a banner in downtown Utica in prime real estate. And what's important about that is that Utica recognizes what the Refugee Center has done for the city. Refugees came to that city. They revitalized entire neighborhoods. There have been congregations that were down to 60 people, 60 parishioners, that now have over 1,000 in downtown Utica. And Utica gets it. The mayor, a German news crew actually came to do a story on us about a year and a half ago, and I cracked up because it was his Wednesday walkabout day, and he will not change that for anything. He walks around the city, he talks to people, he fills potholes, and that day he was trimming low-hanging branches. And the German news crew just thought he was a hoot, and I learned that the word for mayor in German is Bürgermeister, which was great, and I never let him forget it. These are just, in Utica, running the Boilermaker is a big thing. We make sure to include everybody. We make sure that we have presence. And I'm going to talk about a few things very quickly, and I need my glasses. We have done some really unique partnerships, and that's really the key, I think. I am invited to the table that most other resettlement directors don't get invited to. We formed a coalition, a group of a key employer, the Refugee Center, a Workforce Investment Board, so that was the Department of Labor, and the community college. And we worked together to help this employer put together a safety video in 7 different languages that would get employees to comply with OSHA regulations. And because we were thinking outside the box, more people get more jobs more quickly and perform them safer. And now they are looking at our videos and thinking, how do we make this available to other folks? Out of that little partnership, I got invited to be on the Regional Economic Development Council, which has been interesting. I've asked every stupid question, I think, that could be asked, because I'm not an economic person. But I've learned a lot, and being at the table has really helped me, certainly, but it's helped them. There's a workforce shortage. They have lots of things going on that they need help with. We are tasked now to start and build a welcome center for Utica in downtown Utica, the Refugee Center. I mean, to me, this is incredible. We partnered with municipal housing, FEMA, the fire department, and made safety videos that are now being shown around the country in 8 or 9 different languages. And so we are continuing to do things a little bit differently in Utica. And so 15 minutes went really, really fast. If you have questions, please find me. Yeah, it's just, thank you so much for inviting me. There's so much more to say. But, and it's been so interesting for me to hear what all of you are doing. So thank you.